there's a doubling of these 2 units to the 4x1, which is a 1x1 angle. So there's always a doubling. If you don't have a little Gantt square or grid like this to draw your angles, most software products will have a cycle finder tool. So all you have to do is measure from, pop on a vertical line over your low, take your cycle finder tool and measure over to the first top. Then on the second top would be your 2x1 angle. Then you double that to the 4th angle, and that's where your 1x1 comes through. So we can see at this level of the top, we just draw our angles up through these various types. So you can do that with a cycle finder tool. If you don't have that, you may also have a speed resistance line tool. Now a speed resistance tool goes from a low to a high, and it drops a vertical shaft, and then it divides it into quarters and thirds and halves and things. I use the 1/4 and the half. I don't use the 3/4 point much. You see, this is an oddball angle that doesn't do much. But if I'm assuming the first angle is the 4x1, then the midpoint angle that comes through half of that distance is going to be my 2x1 angle. And if I divide it and take the 1/4 point, we get the 1x1, which is what we want. Remember the ratio of 1/4, 1/4? It means there will be 4 boxes to 1. So that's our 1x1 if we assume that the first angle is the 4x1 angle. So there's many ways to draw these various speed resistance tools that we can use. When we do this system and we set the very first impulse wave to the 4x1, we will often get very nice harmonics. But often the market will get away from our grid, and then we don't know what to do. These angles do continue on up into outer space, we can see, for long periods of time. If we notice this angle goes up over 1 and up 1/2, and the correction was along here, corrected over here. But what we can do then is, keeping in mind this principle of doubling, we can use this as a fractal or a square root of the whole move with something like this. We can now take this small unit as one box and make a big giant square. Then we can see as we come up here to the break points, we have a break point here that comes down to the 50% point. And as we near the end of the square, we have a big break that goes all the way down to the edge and catches our angle here. And then when it came back, the exact top was the top of the square. One of the reasons we do all this with angles is that the angles can give us very good information about cycles. Included within the angle and its harmonics are the time cycles. So what we see is when we take the initial bull market impulse wave, if we lay an angle on here along the axis inclination, and then at the first top we draw a horizontal line. We then offset our 2x1, 1x1, 1x2, etc. angles off here. We find something very amazing. We find that in the initial bull market, we have a little top, we bounce off our angle, we go around, and the bull market ends exactly where the 1x2 angle offsets this angle. Then we go into a bear market. We bounce along the angles up and down, but the bear market goes on, and then it ends exactly where the next trend line hits. And then we start a bull market. And the bull market bounces around the angles, support and resistance, and it goes on and on and on until the bull market ends where our next angle comes up and intersects the horizontal. So we see here the origin of cycles and how these are dynamic cycles. They change in length, and they are specific to the individual stock or commodity, and the specification is based on the angle of inclination. If this angle wasn't this steep, if it was a less steep angle over in here, then the cycles would be much longer. So using this kind of information with our angles, they not only give us support and resistance at times, but they give us the big turning points. And this is true on any time frame. So here, for instance, is a 5-minute S&P chart. So if we put a Gantt fan angle on here, we run it through the top, we look to see what happens when we go across and hit our angles. Well, there's a little turn here and a break. If There's an angle over here. It did bounce off this trend line. There's a big turn around here a little bit. Here's a little fluctuation turn. Here's one, but it's not as nice as that last chart where we went from bull market to bear market and whatnot. Well, upon closer examination, we find out why. The problem here is this was not the first little top. It may look like a top, but if we notice, there's no downtrend here. These are all higher bottoms in here. So there's a higher bottom here, one little top, a pullback, higher bottom, higher bottom, higher bottom. And the first time we really topped out was right here. At this point, we have a lower low, a lower high, lower low, a lower high, and we go into a downtrend. So if we now modify our angle, instead of using this incorrect top, do it with the correct top, it would look something like this. And now we've moved our first angle over to here, and we see it works perfectly. The first correction goes down to our angle, but we're still in the bull market. The bull market continues to when it intersects the top with the next angle. Then we start a bear market. The bear market goes down and bounces around the angles. And where does the bear market end? It ends exactly where it should, where the next angle hits. Then we go into a bull phase again. The bull market goes on, and where does it end? It's going to end when the next angle hits right over here. Once in a while on these 5-minute charts, you will get an inversion where this one, instead of going straight up into this angle, comes down. There might be a little double bottom here, and you get another little up surge and then down. But by and large, it will usually follow the pattern, going up to a high here and then the bear market low over here. So there is an enormous amount of information, especially if you're trading S&P E-minis or so, to know exactly to the bar, in most cases, where these events are going to take place. And then we look for little signal reversal bars to get long. Now we'll go back to this chart I showed earlier about the 50% levels being very important. We noticed on this first little black one, they could have went down here, and the red swing took it exactly down to this 50%. And then we noticed the entire run from the low to the high here in green. When it broke the 50% in green, it collapsed. But now I've drawn a true 45-degree angle. It's a 45 adjusted because we've set the first high to our 4x1 angle, and our 2x1 angle would be here, and so our 45 or 1x1 would be in this corner. This 45 true angle represents a moving average of a 50% correction, because it does split the square evenly. So the diagonal of a square represents the 50% swing, just as if we took these horizontal levels. So what we see now is during this correction, it bounces off the angle, bounces off it, and it gives us early warning. When it finally breaks our angle over here, even though it did not break the 50% retracement as yet, at this point, we know, based on angles, the trend has turned down. And when this angle breaks, it goes all the way to the base. We also start to see the patterns here, lower low, lower high, and we start making lower highs by the time it breaks. So a 45-degree angle can often be used as a timing point when it's drawn correctly and the angle breaks. Then you do get a change in trend if you have a properly drawn angle. Now, one of the great secrets that I discovered was what I call the secret angle method. Now, I'm not going to teach that in this video. I have a separate course on that, and you can buy that elsewhere. And that shows many, many examples. I'm just going to show one or two of the very basic principles of the secret angle. And they're based this way. Because of the orientation of the axis, and we've seen how offset angles can spawn cycles, I discovered that the specific angle of your first run will create a series of harmonic resonant points. So in this case, it's about 65 degrees or so. And I found that the 50% of that angle, the angle itself, so 50% of that's like 32.5 or so over here. I then put on this angle that is 1/2 of the angle of the first leg. Then what I do is I put some retracement lines on. I go directly over the low. And what I'm looking for is this point right here. It is the point above the low at the the 50% angle. And this angle here, this level, turns out to be a very strong secret level. If they ever exceed this, they will go to record highs. And usually if they're consolidating or bouncing around, they will stay within this range, bracketed by the low and the high and 50% of this range. And we can see that to be true here. They go up to 50% of the range. It also hit the angle, respected it. They bounce around, they broke down. I did another very quick little one down here. This steep angle down here, I took 1/2 of that steep angle. I drew it here. I put on my maximum level it can go to in the future without changing the trend. It rallies up to the 50% of this distance. 50% levels here, resistance, respects the angle, bounces, goes through it, hits the high. Here's another quick example. Now these are all short-term charts. Notice 5 minutes, 15 minutes. It works on any time frame, even 1 minute. And the more accurately drawn and the better you start from, this is not a major low in history, but if you were to start from a major low every 2 or 3 weeks or so, you would get spectacular results, as opposed to these results, which are good for a day or 3 days on 15-minute charts. So the first leg up we have, we draw our angle. Then we find out what the degree the angle is, and we take 1/2 of that. Then we draw an angle that is 1/2 the number of degrees this is. Then we take the range. And what we're looking for again is we're looking for this point horizontally. And we can see it's a secret number no one knows about but you and I. And it stops them dead every time. And when it goes under it, we know at this point, absolutely guaranteed, they will go back to this low and most likely take it out. In the meantime, if this was a bullish consolidation, they would go down to this 50% level and bounce around here, and when they get over into this area, they would turn up and go to a new high. But in this case, this was not a bullish trend, and so all it did is try to consolidate, and it broke down again. Here's a daily chart on Caterpillar. We take the last swing down, and what's good about this is in the first couple days after the low is made, let's say we're down over here, if you want a quick idea and you want to say, okay, I'm going to guess that the low is in, where can this thing go to? Well, all we have to do is measure the angle, take 1/2 of that angle, and draw another angle. Then we can put on our secret point over here, and we can take a retracement of this level. The 50% level is right here. So at a minimum, if it was going up, it would test this 50%. And it would probably go all the way up to test this, even if it was in a downtrend trading range. But getting through here, and it comes back one more time to the 50%, getting through this level here implies, with this kind of a structure, it will take out this top over here. So many of you too, you may not have software products that tell you what this angle is. I use many of them that do. I know TradeStation has an angle that tells you. I know Ensign does. I know Metastock does. I know Market Analyst does. And there's a number of other products that do. If you don't, you could even use a plastic protractor and overlay your chart to get a rough idea. If you're off by 1 degree or so, it's not going to make a big difference. Once you put your grid on, you can fudge it a little bit to trend fit your grid for an inaccurate angle. But it will give you a very good first look at where you're expecting the chart to go. It also works on all time frames. This is the big bear market from 2007 to 2009 on the S&P. We put on that first trend line, we put on 1/2 that angle, and voila, final top of the bull move so far, at least as of this date. Now, having said that, if this was to come down and hold these double bottoms and turn up and go through here, that would imply a potential retracement to the high, or at least back to one of these other tops at a minimum. But that has not happened so far. So it remains to be seen if it would have to fall down here. Note too, in the meantime, if we subdivided this range even more into 1/8, 1/4, 1/16, it's probably pulled back to the midpoint right in here between these ranges. So this is probably the 3-point level, and we can see some of these other pivots are coming in through there.